Many of the OP champs from 14.22 are becoming weaker for this patch, as Graves, Caitlyn, and Kog'Maw will be dropping down the tier list. Rengar will finally be getting a boost out of the jungle C tier, and these buffs to Yuntal Wild Arrows are looking really nice. And are you sick of losing games from bad teammates? Well, at SkillCapped, we turn your frustrating losses into satisfying wins. Take our brand new Season 14 courses that teach you the secrets to winning as a top laner, jungler, mid laner, AD, carry, and support. Then pair that with our other new courses on how to counter OP top and mid laners, master your jungle clears, or check out our new Bronze to Diamond series. We even have new Season 14 courses on macro, wave control, trading, settings and hotkeys, CSing, vision, mechanics, low elo mistakes, and the list goes on. Then head on over to our Smurf commentaries. Simply select the champion you want to master and get guides from challenger experts teaching how to play your champion in the exact rank you're stuck in. You're even guaranteed to have all your questions answered by that very same challenger expert. Our service really does work, and that's why we offer a rank up guarantee. If you don't rank up while actively using SkillCapped, you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below right now to get the rank you've always dreamed of. So to start off the video, we have a few item changes to cover, and we'll point out which champions will be affected the most. Yuntal Wild Arrows is getting buffed with its cost going down by 100 gold. The passive duration is up from 4 to 6 seconds, and the passive cooldown drops from 40 to 30 seconds. Some really nice buffs overall here to Wild Arrows, and these changes will now make the item optimal on a bunch of different picks. Jinx is one ADC who had already been liking Yuntal a ton in 14.22, so she's going to be thriving this patch. With the Collector getting nerfed for this patch, Caitlyn is an ADC who should be liking Wild Arrows a lot more now. We'll have to see if these buffs are enough to push the item into optimal territory for Yasuo. Wild Arrows was finding some decent success on Yasuo in 14.22, but it was still being outperformed by Kraken Slayer, so it will be interesting to track for this patch. Twitch, Aphelios, Tristana, and Zarya are a few more ADCs who we are less certain on as to whether or not Wild Arrows becomes optimal for them, but are ones to keep an eye on when the patch hits live servers. The next item change consists of a nerf to Ghostblade, as the item will be losing out of combat movement speed, and the active duration is also being reduced. However, these changes will only affect ranged champions. So Graves is definitely the champ who will be affected most by these nerfs, as he's been the ranged champ of using Ghostblade the most in recent patches. Jhin and Misfortune had been running the item a little bit, and it was actually quite underrated on a few other ranged champs like Kindred and Aphelios. Graves is still going to continue running the item, but for other ADCs, they'll probably just swap back to alternative options. Another ADC item being tagged with a nerf for this patch is the Collector, as the cost is going up from $29.50 to $3,000. Nerf really isn't that big, but will slightly reduce the strength of a ton of ADCs, as the Collector has been a very popular purchase on a wide range of champs. Graves is definitely the one champ hit the most by the 14.23 item changes, because he's one of the few that runs both Ghostblade and the Collector as core pickups. We've got some follow-up adjustments to bounties for 14.23, as champion bounties will now grow 14% faster from kills and assists. Champion bounty reduction due to losing is being increased up to 4 times, and on top of this, max contribution to objective bounties from gold leads is being doubled. Let's move on to covering all the top lane changes now, and first up, we have a few adjustments to Ambessa. Q2 is getting buffed, as the cast window is going from 3.5 to 4 seconds. Passive dashes will no longer go over player-created terrain. R will be getting a change so that movement commands issued before a successful cast of your R will be discarded after your R connects to avoid pathing the player towards a location they are no longer near. The passive change is a nerf, but overall, these should end up being net buffs for Ambessa, just due to the fact that you won't even be running into champs that can create terrain in the majority of your games. So as players are getting used to Ambessa, her win rate has been steadily on the rise and is looking like a really strong top laner right now, so these quality of life adjustments will just add to that. It's looking more and more like there's a very underrated build for Ambessa as well, which consists of taking Voltaic Cyclo Sword instead of Eclipse. There's been enough of a sample size at this point to say that Cyclo Sword is actually a really good pickup on the champ, but it's still being slept on quite a bit. There's also the summoner spell combination of Ignite and Teleport that is being picked quite a bit by high elo Ambessa players, and they are seeing great results with it. So as more optimization occurs on the champion, we think Ambessa is going to be in a phenomenal spot for solo queue in 14.23, and we'll be moving her up into the top lane S tier. So it's an incredibly light patch for top lane, as Ambessa is the only traditional top laner being adjusted. This means that other than Ambessa getting a push up into the S tier, the top lane tier list is going to be structured exactly as to how it was in 14.22. Malphite will continue to be placed in the OP tier, as he's just the most consistent top lane champ that you can pick for solo queue right now. There are a ton of really great S tier picks to choose from though, as the meta for top lane in solo queue is very diverse. One of the more underrated top lane champs that you can play right now is Maokai. Mao has been finding some really good success abusing the Unending Despair rush, as the item is just so undervalued right now. Maokai top players who are able to complete Unending Despair were winning over 55% of the time in 14.22, which is actually absolutely insane. The full build has you going into Winter's Approach second and then Spirit Visage third. So if you want to pick up a very reliable top lane tank who's always going to be useful and actually matches up very well in lane against meta picks like Jax and Darius, then Maokai is the play and you'll find him in the S tier. It's a much more eventful patch for the jungle in 14.23 as we've got a lot of meta shifting changes. Master Yi is first up on the buff list as he's going to have his R attack speed increased at the second and third rank in the spell. This change is definitely one of the more underwhelming of the bunch. Buff does not affect Yi until he gets level 11, and in that case, we don't see it being overly impactful. For now, we're going to be leaving Master Yi in the jungle A tier. A change we see being quite a bit more impactful is the buff to Rammus. Q cooldown is dropping by a whole 4 seconds at rank 1. We'll have to see if this change affects the optimal skill order for Rammus moving forward. One of the main reasons to why Q max has been so effective on Rammus is due to the fact the cooldown gets reduced by a ton when you have the spell fully maxed out. Now that the cooldown is lower earlier on, we'll have to see if allocating some earlier points in W or E becomes more optimal. Even if Q max stays the way to go, this buff is just super nice as it will increase the clear speed of Rammus and make his early skirmish stronger. So we're going to be giving Rammus a boost up the tier list, moving him from B into A tier. Rengar is the third jungler who's getting buffed, and there are 2 changes headed his way. Both of the buffs are to Rengar's ultimate, as the bonus damage total AD ratio is being increased from 50 to 100%. Armor Shred is going up on R from 12 scaling to 24 to 15 scaling to 25. Some really nice buffs here to increase the snowball power of Rengar, as unlike the Master Yi R changes, Rengar actually benefits from these ones at level 6. So for the first time in a while, Rengar will finally be leaving the jungle C tier as we're giving him a bump up into B. There are a bunch of junglers who are getting directly nerfed, and Kha'Zix will be one of them. Base armor is going to be targeted as it's dropping from 36 to 32. Evolved W isolated slow is being reduced as well, going from 75 to 60%. So nothing that should completely remove Kha'Zix from meta. Nerfs could be enough to warrant a push down into A tier, but for now we'll be leaving Ka in S, and if the nerf does end up being more impactful, we'll adjust him down for the mid-patch tier list. Shyvana nerfs are a bit of a surprise, but she has been excelling quite a bit in the lower elos, so it's likely as to why she's being nerfed. Magic resist growth is going from 2.05 to 1.5. EAP ratio is going to be lowered as well, dropping from 80 to 70%. Definitely not the end of the world for Shyvana here, so we won't be shifting her further down the tier list. We have a Skarner nerf lined up for this patch, as his Q bonus health ratio will be going down from 4 to 3%. Change should end up being somewhat impactful due to the fact that Skarner does end up stacking a ton of bonus health in his build. There's going to be better jungle options for solo queue moving forward, as we'll be dropping Skarner down from A into B tier. Zac is going to be nerfed in a very similar way to Skarner, as his health ratio on Q is being reduced from 4 to 3%. Zac Q is a max health ratio as well, and not a bonus health ratio like Skarner's Q, so the Zac nerf is actually even more significant. We've had Zac in the jungle S tier for such a long time, but with this nerf, we're going to be dropping him into A. Teemo jungle has taken the meta by storm and has been dominating the lower ranks, so he's getting nerfed for this patch, with his E bonus damage to monsters being reduced from 150 to 125%. Nerf shouldn't spell the end for Teemo jungle, but it will put a dent in his top tier standing, as we're going to be moving Teemo from S into A tier. So looking at the tier list for jungle now, it's the role that is going to be most significantly adjusted for 14.23. OP tier will no longer be featuring Graves, as we're moving him down into S tier. Nerfs to both Ghostblade and the Collector will negatively influence Graves, and we just don't see him being that cut above everyone else anymore. But that's not to say he won't remain a great option, which is why he only falls down into S. So the OP tier is going to have a new look, as we've got Nocturne and Wukong leading the way. Nock has been great for a while now, so he just bumps up due to all these other junglers around his power level getting weaker. Wukong is charged back into meta after his buffs from 14.22, and is definitely one of the more slept on jungle picks now for solo queue. There's just one mid laner getting buffed for this patch, and it's going to be Azir. As per usual with most Azir buffs, it's a pretty small one, as his WAP ratio is going up by 5% at all ranks. So we won't be moving Azir up the tier list, as he's going to remain down in C. Aurora is getting a pretty big overhaul for this patch, as many of her abilities are being changed in significant ways. We've got lots of changes to Q, as the cooldown is going up by 1 second, damage is going up by 5 at all ranks, while the range on Q is up from 850 to 900. Q will now automatically recast if the duration runs out without Aurora recasting the spell. E range is being increased from 800 to 825. Passive movement speed is being removed. However, W is now going to grant 20 scaling to 40% more movement speed on cast. R is being changed so that it will now grant W movement speed while inside of it instead of amplifying movement speed. R is also adjusted so that instead of trapping enemies inside, it's now going to slow enemies on exit by 75% for 1.5 scaling to 2 seconds. R duration is going up from 1.5 scaling to 2.5 seconds to 2 scaling to 4 seconds. So there's a lot of power being shifted around here in Aurora's kit, which makes it it more difficult to get an accurate read on where she'll land power-wise for this patch. We're not going to be adjusting her tier list placement for now, but we'll provide an update for our mid-patch tier list if the changes do land significant. So with very few mid-lane champions changed for this patch, we have a pretty similar looking tier list to where we had it in 14.22. Ahri and Vex will remain in the OP tier, so nothing changes there. Swain is one champ we are giving an added bump up for 14.23, as it turns out his buffs from last patch have landed him in a really great spot for pretty much every role besides support and of course jungle. The Sylas nerf from last patch has actually ended up hurting him a little more than what we were expecting, so we're moving him down into the A tier. The only ADC who will be receiving a direct buff for this patch is Misfortune, as her Q mana cost is going down from 43 scaling to 55 to 40 flat. Now, considering that MF has been running the Collector as a core item lately, and had even been seeing the most success rushing Ghostblade, those item nerfs should more or less even things out, and this buff won't end up being too impactful. With that said, we won't be moving Misfortune up the tier list due to this direct buff, as she's going to stay in A. Caitlyn is going to be directly nerfed, with her R bonus AD ratio dropping from 150 to 100%. This nerf, combined with the fact that Yuntal Wild Arrows is getting buffed, should shift build priority on Caitlyn for this patch. The Collector is even getting nerfed, and when you factor in this nerf to R, going for a no attack speed 2-item core won't be as powerful now. Wild Arrows providing more consistent DPS power is likely going to be the way to go for Kate's rush item. As for Kate's tier list placement, we do think she's going to end up in a net negative spot after all the 14.23 changes, so we're moving her from OP into S. Kog'Maw has been the best bot lane carry for a few patches now, so Riot's looking to more specifically target his AP builds. Q armor and magic resist shred is dropping from 23 scaling to 31% to 16 scaling to 32%. E damage is getting nerfed as well, with the base damage dropping by 25 at max rank, and AP ratio is down by 5%. AD Cog should still remain a pretty good pick despite these nerfs, because E damage is only down by 5 at rank 1, and the AP ratio nerf to E doesn't matter for AD Cog. We likely see build priority shift back to AD after these changes, and if that's the case, Kog'Maw should still be a solid ADC, but just not the OP champ that he's been, so we're adjusting him from OP into S. Jinx is going to be changed in a more power neutral way for this patch, as her AD growth is being increased from 2.5 to 3.25. W is nerfed though, with the total AD ratio going down from 160 to 140%. So what these changes mean for Jinx is that more attack speed focused builds rise up, while full lethality takes a back seat. Especially with Yuntal Wild Arrows getting buffed for this patch, there's no way that the item does not become the most optimal rush on the champ. Overall, since Wild Arrows is getting buffed, we actually see Jinx gaining power for this patch, so she's going to be locking down an OP tier spot. If you guys are looking to learn Jinx and take full advantage of her strength in meta, then our new Mastered in Minutes course that is up on our website is a great resource for you. Riot has a big overhaul planned for Smolder, as all of his spells are being changed in some way, shape, or form. Q, W, and R damage to minions will be dropping. Q base damage is going up. However, the total AD ratio is being swapped for a bonus AD ratio, and stack scaling is down from 40 to 30%. Q is now going to restore 15 mana on kill. The bounce damage on Q is going to be lowered from 75 to 50%. Q burn damage is being adjusted so that it scales worse with stacks. It will no longer have an AP ratio. However, the bonus AD ratio is being increased. W damage is being changed so that the base is lower. However, the bonus AD ratio is up significantly, so an early game nerf, but a late game buff with this one. The mana cost of W is being lowered early, but increased later on. E base damage is also going down, but the total AD ratio is up, and stack scaling is going down from 20 to 10%. E bolt scaling is buffed, going from 1 per 150 stacks to 1 per 100 stacks. And for the final change, it's the Smolder's R cooldown, as it's being reduced from 140 scaling to 120 to just 120 seconds flat. So with stack scaling nerfed across the board on many of Smolder's abilities, but the total and bonus AD ratios buffed, it's going to provide Smolder with a little more raw strength and not have him so tied down to the stacking element. In theory, this should be net positive for solo queue, where waiting on stacks and playing around that isn't as reliable as in the pro scene. Where Smolder actually lands power-wise though is extremely difficult to say, just due to the sheer amount of changes. So we're not going to jump the gun and move Smolder anywhere on the ADC tier list for now, but we will have an update for mid-patch if the adjustments do result in a power shift. So we're going to have a bit of a new look to the ADC tier list for 14.23, as the OP tier is now going to be locked down by Jinx and Corki. To be honest though, this is a more difficult patch to accurately predict the upper tier ADCs, just due to several moving parts. We're rating Jinx highly because we believe that the buffs to Yuntal will help push her over the edge, while many ADCs around her are losing power due to the Collector nerf. ADCs who can take advantage of these Wild Arrows buffs are going to be the biggest risers this patch, and Jinx was one of the best users of the item in 14.22, so we're quite high on her moving forward. Corki is that next ADC in line to move up, who was just slightly in behind Kate and Cog in recent patches, so with both those ADCs nerfed, it makes sense for Corki to gain relative strength for this patch. Champs that are more reliant on the Collector like Samira, Neela, and Jhin will be be losing some strength, but it's only a 50 gold increase, so it's likely not enough to actually result in a significant power shift for those champs, and we won't be moving them down the tier list. There's not too much going on down in the support role for 14.23, as Tahm Kench is getting some rather unimpactful changes. It's the AP ratios on Tom's passive and R that are being reduced, which won't actually affect his viability as a support. Passive AP ratio is dropping from 2 to 1.5% per 100 bonus health, while R shield AP ratio is down from 150 to 100%. There have been some top lane builds going around on Tom that have been implementing AP items, so the nerfs really only affect those niche builds. Support will remain just as strong as it was in 14.22, so we'll be leaving Kench in the S tier. Rel is the only other support being changed this patch, but they're actually pretty big adjustments. Rel's passive is now going to deal 5% total armor and magic resist magic damage on hit. Passive minimum resist steal is going up from 0.8 scaling to 2 to 1 scaling to 2. Base armor will be lowered from 36 to 30, while base magic resist is dropping from 30 to 28. Attack speed growth is being increased from 1.5 to 2%. Attack animations are also being sped up. W dismounted movement speed is being increased from 297 to 315. W dismounted armor and magic resist scaling is up from 12 to 15%. W mounted speed is being lowered and will now scale by W rank instead of by level. Q and W stun durations are being reduced. Q is down by 0.1 seconds and W down by 0.6 seconds. Tenacity is now going to affect the knock-up on Rel's W. E retreating movement speed is being lowered, however chasing movement speed is going up. The cooldown on E will be lowered from 15 seconds to 14 scaling to 10 seconds. E damage will no longer have a base value, and instead the max health ratio is going up from 3% to 5 scaling to 7%. So from these changes, it's looking like the damage output of Rel should be higher now. However, the durability and lockdown strength of the champ won't be as strong. We wouldn't be surprised if these adjustments end up landing net negative, as being able to chain CC a target and lock them down for an extended duration is something that makes Rel really strong, so losing some of that power is concerning. Of course, we'll have to see though, because there is a chance that the buffs being issued are actually enough to outweigh the nerfs. So like all the other big overhauls that we'll be seeing in 14.23, we won't be adjusting Rel's tier list placement for now, but we'll circle back for the mid-patch tier list if need be. So for the complete support tier list, OP tier is going to be locked down by 3 champions, as we've got Lulu, Vel'Koz, and Poppy. The support meta really should not be much different than what it was last patch, because it was just Tom and Rel adjusted for 14.23. Tahm Kench changes don't even matter either, so it's just Rel as the only support who could end up seeing her power shift. Lots of variety overall though in the support role right now, as Vel'Koz is a really great mage pickup. Lulu, Nami, and Janna are all super strong enchanters, while Poppy, Tahm Kench, Maokai, and Braum are a few of the top tier melee support options. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit SkillCapped.com and see the difference. So that's gonna wrap everything up for our 14.23 solo queue tier list. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you back soon.